The High Dive, where we talk about life, health, and everything Alexander Technique. I am here today with Richard Brennan from Galway, Ireland, to talk about the Alexander Technique. Welcome, Richard. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, hi Mary. Hi. Good to be
So
here.
great. So what should we chat about today?
Say it again, sorry.
What should we chat about today? What should we talk about today?
I feel just with the Alexander World, I think a lot of teachers are just, they could do with more self-confidence in themselves and in the technique. So we all know that in this world, something somewhere has gone terribly wrong with posture, with the way people use themselves, with the way they think. And, we start off very upright. We start off with our movements very easy. And then by the time we're teenagers, we're slumped. We don't want to help. We're withdrawn, partly because of the education, but partly because of the society we live in. And we all know that the technique is an amazing tool to help people. But we have a problem. People are not queuing up for it. They're queuing up for football matches or they're queuing up for pop festivals, but they're not queuing up for Alexander teachers. And a lot of teachers have a struggle making a living. And I just wonder why that is. And the first thing that actually ever hit me was I was on my own training course. I was 3 months into it. It was a Christmas party. And somebody said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, I'm on the Alexander Technique training course. And it was a small town, Totnes in England. And so everyone knew what the Alexander Technique was. And he said, "You don't look like an Alexander student." And I said, "Well, what do Alexander students look like?" And he said, "Well, they look like they're riding a bike without a saddle." Okay? Something jumped up their arse. So they're actually both upright. Okay? Okay, that was the first thing. The second thing was I went to a congress. The first congress I went to, Alexander Conference, was in Brighton in 1988. And the story went around that there were two janitors talking to each other, and they got overheard by an Alexander teacher. And the first janitor said, "Well, what's this conference all about?" Because it's very unusual. It's not like the usual conferences we have. And the other janitor said, "Well, I don't know what it's about, but all I know is they've all got something wrong with their necks." Okay? Interesting.
Very telling. Yes.
So what is the message we're giving out? Okay? Well, again, I had another experience I had was I took my own son who invented the Vivo barefoot shoes, and he was selling his shoes at the 2004 Oxford Congress. And we were sitting in a Thai restaurant in the evening, and he said to me, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" And I said, No, go far ahead. He said, "Why do all Alexander teachers walk that way?" And I said, what do you mean, walk what way? He said, "Well, they all look like they're auditioning for Night of the Zombies. When I'm pushing a trolley full of shoes, most people will get out of the way. But the Alexander teachers don't. They just stop in front of the trolley and they make me go around them." And he said, it's very bizarre. And it's very interesting when you get into the eyes of the head of people looking into the technique. Okay? So what I think is happening is people have a certain image of what you should look like, especially in an Alexander setting. Another story I had was I went to the 2009 San Francisco AMSTAC conference, and there was a person there I met, and I said to her, do you come every year? And she said, "Well, I used to, but I had to stop coming because for 3 weeks afterwards I got a neck problem." So she never had a neck problem for the rest of the year, but then suddenly she was in an Alexander conference, and just the way she was holding herself,
Yes.
thinking that she was directing, okay? And I just think this, people looking in on this, they see us as quite strange. And I would like to address that. And basically, again, I mentioned before that somebody is coming to the convention in Ireland, in Dublin next week. and they're very worried because they've been teaching 15 years, American teacher, but she's worried about the exchanges. Am I going to be good enough? Who am I going to be put with? Will they criticize me? And am I good enough? Are my hands good enough? And I think we need to address this quite big. And I was watching a Brené Brown video about vulnerability. And it's not just Alexander teachers, it's the whole world is trying to not be vulnerable because they see vulnerability as weakness. And I think we as Alexander teachers, we have that even bigger than other people. So if we're vulnerable, and that's why we have to be sure that the way we got taught the technique is basically the right way. Right. And if somebody else comes in, we don't want to know. We don't want to share ideas. We want to prove that we're right all the time. Okay? So if you're a McDonald teacher and a Carrington teacher, God help you, because you've got very different training. And I was trained Carrington, but I actually have had a lot of McDonald work from Gura Pincus, from Yehuda Koopman, and I actually think it's two halves of the same coin, and they really complement each other. And if we could get out of the way and embrace each other's way of teaching, I think we would make the technique even more powerful.
And I wonder, if, as you're speaking, I'm wondering where judgment comes in. Is that just before you said the word embrace, I was thinking the word embrace. And in order to embrace, I think that you have to throw aside judgment, and you have to hone that non-judgmental side of you to be open.
We have to be non-judgmental to other people, but also to ourselves as well. Because we can be very non-judgmental to other people and yet be judging ourselves big time.
Yeah.
Okay. And we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. We all do. Some people are very good at explaining the technique, but their hands aren't maybe that good. Other people have wonderful hands, but are useless at explaining it. But it doesn't really matter. It's just that you have to find out what your strength is and acknowledge your weaknesses. And the thing about the Brené Brown video, it said that vulnerability is the starting point to creativity. So when you're vulnerable and you feel vulnerable, that's when you can be most creative.
Yeah. I buy that. I buy that for sure. When you're creative, when you're vulnerable, you can go in many different directions. You can start anew, you can start afresh, and that's where creativity and growth comes from.
Exactly. Yeah. So and community, as an Alexander community, if we could tell each other, like, well, I don't feel confident with this and I don't feel confident with that, and I'm really not sure what primary control is. But I've been teaching 25 years, so I should know what primary control is. But maybe there's something else about primary control that I don't know. And there's a story of with Jeremy Chant, and he was sitting with Marjorie Barstow in Australia, and he went off to get some ice cream, and there was a big long queue, so he took about 10 minutes to get the ice cream. When she got back, Marjorie Barstow was sitting on the bench, and she said, "Do you know what I've been trying to work out?" And Jeremy Chant said, "Well, how am I supposed to know? I'm not a mind reader." He said, I'm trying to work out what forward and up is. And that is 50 years after. 50 years after. I had another experience in Budapest. I gave a workshop with a lot of teachers about the primary directions. And I realized that there was about 50 teachers in the room, but they all had different ideas of where the neck was. So when you think of the neck to be free, people were thinking of different things.
Yes.
So Elizabeth Walker was there. So I had a cup of coffee with her and I asked her, where did Alexander say the neck was? And she said, well, in 3 years, he never told us. 3 years on a training course, and Alexander didn't tell you where the neck is. But then she said, well, he always indicated it was high up, somewhere between the ears. So that gives us some clue. But can you imagine the nightmare of somebody whose technique it is having three years with people, but not really explaining where the neck is, where you're supposed to be thinking, or even how you're supposed to be thinking. So it does make our job quite difficult, and we're trying to work out all the, nitty-gritty of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you have a big week coming up, and you are going to talk about this at the conference in Ireland, in Dublin. Do you come to any conclusions or solutions? Do you find a path to create this vulnerability?
I do. I think if people could let their Alexander uniform, if they could take it off, because actually the title of the conference is The Heart of the Technique. It is looking at the habits, the mental habits, physical habits, and emotional habits of a human being, and see which ones are detrimental and which ones are not detrimental. And when I have a detrimental habit, whether it's mental, physical, or emotional, then I need to let go of that. And I think we have a kind of emotional armoring.
Yes.
We need to be in control the whole time, and we do that through inhibition and direction. But I don't think it's the way inhibition and direction should be used, because it keeps us apart from our colleagues. We should be working together, not in a separate way. That's my feeling. If we could join together and find a common denominator, we could make this technique very accessible to the rest of the world. And that's my aim of doing these conventions.
That's great. I really I wish I could join you, and I'm sure all of the Alexander teachers out there who are in my shoes and are unable to attend are feeling the same way. I'd love to talk to you again, Richard, after the conference, so to kind of get the highlights of it. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'll see what I can do. But you can still catch a plane. There's still places on Aer Lingus, New York.
Right. So we're going to close this little chat. Is there anything else that you would like to add to our conversation?
I don't know how it came across, but I think it was okay. Yeah.
I think you did a great job. And the folks out there who are watching, or if you see this after, these chats stay on Facebook for quite a while, feel free to write a comment to me or to Richard, or you could send in, go to Richard's email website and contact him through there. I've just posted that. It should be up. Yep, there it is. It's up on the banner. And
Okay.
Richard, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. So when will it be up? Can I see it?
In
In a day or so?